41 days into continuous operations across Bình Province. Helicopter formations cycle without pause as battalions are inserted into narrowing valleys. Artillery fire saturates suspected withdrawal corridors, and intelligence reports confirm the enemy division remains intact. What was conceived as the largest airmobile assault of the war has become a test of weather mobility, and synchronized firepower can compress terrain fast enough to prevent organized dispersal into the highlands. Thousands of troops have been lifted, repositioned, and sustained by overlapping fire bases, while cumulative casualties mount on both sides and supply routes stretch under relentless sorties and night probes. How did the escalation logic of 1965 convince American planners that air mobility could turn fleeting contact into decisive destruction in the Second Corps? And when the final sweeps close across Binzing's interior valleys, will concentrated air mobility deliver annihilation, or confirm that dispersal defines the true limits of search-and-destroy warfare? To understand how that decisive moment took shape, we need to go back. By mid-1965, the United States had committed major ground forces to South Vietnam in an effort to prevent what appeared to be an accelerating communist victory across multiple regions of the country. The strategy that emerged sought to stem the tide of enemy momentum through aggressive offensive operations designed to seize the initiative and disrupt North Vietnamese main force units before they could mass decisively. American ground forces were introduced not to occupy terrain permanently, but to blunt enemy offensives, stabilize threatened provinces, and create the operational space necessary for further deployments still en route. Within this framework, the 1st Cavalry Division Airmobile represented a new operational concept, structured around helicopter mobility that allowed rapid concentration of infantry, artillery, and logistical support. The division's combat experience in the Ia Drang Valley during late 1965 demonstrated that vertical envelopment could insert battalions directly into contested zones and sustain them with continuous fire support. Yet that same campaign also revealed a structural limitation. While air mobility enabled rapid engagement, North Vietnamese forces retained the ability to disengage into restrictive terrain and reconstitute beyond immediate reach. As 1966 began, operational pressure intensified into the Second Corps' tactical zone, particularly in Bình Province, where communist units threatened coastal population centers and interior lines of communication. The province's geography created an enduring asymmetry. Narrow coastal plains allowed temporary control, but the adjoining highlands and jungle-covered ridges provided depth, concealment, and maneuver corridors for organized withdrawal. Enemy forces exploited this terrain to avoid sustained battles, preferring calculated engagements followed by dispersion into compartmented mountain zones that complicated pursuit and target acquisition. To counter this pattern, American planners expanded the integration of highly mobile field artillery, establishing fire bases that could be airlifted, emplaced rapidly, and repositioned in support of maneuver units. These fire bases extended the operational reach of infantry battalions, providing responsive, indirect fire capable of reinforcing isolated landing zones and sustaining contact beyond initial assault phases. Coordination between artillery, tactical aviation, and helicopter lift matured into a system designed to compress enemy maneuver space and deny prolonged sanctuary within contested districts. The declared objective in Bình therefore went beyond clearing villages or disrupting supply lines. It aimed at locating, fixing, and destroying an entire North Vietnamese division through sustained operational pressure. The campaign thus became inevitable within the logic of escalation. If the airmobile concept could transform mobility into annihilation, it would validate attrition as a viable strategy against regular formations. Failure, however, would expose the limits of search-and-destroy operations in a war where terrain concealment and tactical withdrawal consistently offset technological superiority. The operation began with coordinated helicopter assaults across multiple landing zones in Bình Province, intended to fragment enemy cohesion before organized withdrawal could be executed. Infantry battalions were inserted deep into contested districts, immediately establishing defensive perimeters, while artillery batteries were airlifted to hastily prepared fire-base positions. Initial engagements confirmed the presence of organized North Vietnamese forces, yet resistance remained selective and controlled, indicating deliberate avoidance of decisive battle. Helicopter mobility enabled a rapid repositioning of companies, but the enemy refused to mass in exposed areas where American artillery and tactical air power could dominate. Commanders responded by widening the operational perimeter, inserting additional elements to block likely withdrawal corridors linking coastal plains to interior mountain sanctuaries. This expansion intensified logistical demands, increasing sortie rates for troop lift, ammunition resupply, and casualty evacuation under sporadic ground fire. New fire bases were established on elevated terrain to create overlapping artillery coverage, designed to restrict maneuver during daylight and interdict night movement. Forward observers, aerial reconnaissance, and centralized fire direction centers formed an integrated system capable of delivering rapid indirect fires in support of dispersed units. Despite this concentration of mobility and firepower, enemy elements dispersed into smaller formations, blending into villages and forested slopes beyond immediate detection. North Vietnamese units then initiated calculated counteractions, including night probes against isolated positions and ambushes targeting predictable supply routes. Artillery responded with defensive fires and illumination missions, while tactical aviation struck suspected base areas in coordination with renewed ground sweeps. Casualties were inflicted during these clashes, yet intelligence assessments indicated that the enemy divisional structure remained intact despite localized losses. Determined to prevent regrouping, American commanders sustained operational tempo, launching successive air assaults to maintain continuous pressure across contested districts. Helicopter lift capacity became the decisive variable, governing how rapidly battalions could exploit fleeting contact before enemy units dissolved into compartmented terrain. Field artillery displacement followed maneuver elements closely, requiring rapid emplacement techniques adapted to restrictive ground and limited road networks. After weeks of continuous operations, the campaign evolved into sustained attrition, marked by repeated contacts, cumulative losses, and the growing realization that mobilizing the enemy proved easier than destroying him. After 41 days of continuous operations across Bình Định Province, the campaign approached its decisive phase as American commanders concentrated forces for final sweeps through remaining suspected enemy concentrations. Helicopter formations intensified insertion cycles, shifting battalions rapidly between sectors where reconnaissance and intercepted communications suggested residual. North Vietnamese elements were attempting organized withdrawal. Artillery fire bases were repositioned once more to extend coverage over interior valleys and likely escape corridors leading toward the highlands. Forward observers coordinated sustained barrages against identified movement routes, while tactical aviation struck storage sites and assembly areas revealed through cumulative intelligence analysis. Ground engagements during this final phase were intense but fragmented, marked by short, violent clashes, followed by rapid enemy disengagement into restrictive terrain. American units reported significant enemy casualties, captured weapons, and the disruption of local command structures that had operated within the province. Operational reports highlighted the effectiveness of synchronized air mobility and artillery support in sustaining pressure across dispersed battlefields without fixed front lines. Yet intelligence summaries increasingly reflected a sobering assessment. Although enemy losses were measurable, the divisional framework had not collapsed under cumulative attrition. Instead of annihilation, the result was dispersal, with surviving elements withdrawing in organized fashion toward sanctuaries beyond the immediate operational area. The capacity of North Vietnamese units to absorb punishment, fragment temporarily, and later reconstitute exposed the structural limits of search and destroy methodology. American forces had demonstrated mobility on an unprecedented scale, moving thousands of troops by air and sustaining them through integrated artillery and logistical systems. They had inflicted substantial casualties and disrupted enemy activity within key districts, temporarily restoring relative security to contested population centers. However, the core objective complete destruction of a North Vietnamese division within the operational time frame remained unrealized. The decisive moment was, therefore, not a battlefield breakthrough, but an operational recognition. Scale and speed alone could not guarantee strategic annihilation against an adversary structured for elastic defense. As the operation concluded, Commanders faced an unavoidable conclusion: the largest Airmobile assault of the war had validated mobility and firepower. Yet it had also revealed that dispersal, not destruction, defined the outcome. By the end of 41 days of sustained operations in Bình Province, American forces had inflicted substantial casualties on enemy units and disrupted their immediate operational freedom. Statistical reports emphasized enemy killed in action, weapons captured, and the temporary collapse of communist influence in several contested districts along the coastal plain. Yet these gains came at measurable cost, as American units absorbed casualties during repeated air assaults, perimeter defenses, and ambushes along exposed supply routes. The human toll reflected the intensity of sustained contact operations conducted without fixed front lines, where movement and security required constant vigilance. Territorially, control achieved during the campaign proved conditional rather than permanent, dependent upon continued patrols, fire-base presence, and rapid reaction capability. Once major elements redeployed or shifted focus, surviving enemy formations retained the ability to re-enter previously cleared areas and resume political and military activity. Strategically, the operation reinforced American confidence in the Airmobile concept, demonstrating that helicopter mobility could mass combat power with unprecedented speed and sustain it through integrated fire support. Field artillery integration with aviation became a doctrinal standard, extending indirect fire coverage deep into restrictive terrain previously inaccessible to conventional maneuver. The campaign also strengthened the broader strategy of attrition, emphasizing cumulative enemy losses rather than immediate territorial conquest as the primary metric of progress. However, the inability to destroy an entire North Vietnamese division exposed a structural reality. Mobility increased contact, but contact did not guarantee annihilation. The legacy of the operation lay therefore in dual recognition. Its scale marked the apex of confidence in air mobility, while its outcome revealed that dispersion and reconstitution remained viable enemy responses.